In the mid to late 90s, regional anesthesia was a huge expansion, in a huge expansion period. And up until then, there were local areas of excellence, I would say, with mentors who were extremely well known. And during that period of time before I became president and when I was president, the meeting was expanding tremendously. The society was expanding. We had a great membership. Regional anesthesia had really burgeoned into a very popular technique again, and there was the training programs were increasing, so there were a lot more people interested. Great research was being done in particularly the areas of peripheral nerve blocks at that point, which had kind of fallen behind. We'd talked a lot about spinals and epidurals when I was first starting in regional anesthesia, and that's really when things really opened up for regional anesthesia.
Interesting. And what role do you think ASRA played in all of that?
Critical, absolutely critical. ASRA started out with the senior members who were the founding fathers, were a sort of centers of excellence, if you will. And they were masters. People literally came to watch them demonstrate a block. And they were amazing. They were comfortable. They were very comfortable with each other. They were great with audiences. People loved talking to them. It was just like watching a popular road show. It was really fun. And then over time, as younger folks started being trained, they gradually came into the society. And Ben Cavino, I would say, and Kaz DeFazio were two of the people who really felt very strongly that that we needed to bring in fresh blood. And those, along with Phil and Don Breidenbau and other members at that time, were really starting to recruit interested younger people to come in. And that was the kind of wave that I was brought in from training at Virginia Mason Clinic. But up until then, there were only a few places where regional was even being done. So ASRA had some funding from the ASRA Pharmaceutical. They worked very closely with them back in those days. Of course, that's changed a lot. Yeah. But it was funding to help expand regional across the US. I mean, obviously ASRA had a reason for wanting to do that, but much of it was just that they felt if there were more blocks being done, it would be good across the board. So ASRA had these workshops all over the country, and 4 or 5 of us would go, usually 3 or 4 actually, because we would get some local people if we could. And so the ASRA folks became extremely collegial, very close, and got to know the folks around the country and bring them in. And I think without ASRA, regional anesthesia could not have expanded during that time, because there would not have been the communication about what was being done, what research was important, and that push to bring that practice into your hospital. I think the person who probably mentored me the most was Don Breidenbau. He had a warmth and a charm. It was a time period, it was 1981 when I went to Seattle, and there still weren't a lot of women in medicine, and most of the women who went into anesthesia weren't doing fellowships, and they certainly weren't doing fellowships in highly technical areas like regional anesthesia. So when I went out to Seattle, I had been advised to go out there by one of his students, Lee Noss, who was at Mayo Clinic. And he made me feel very, very welcome. Then there were several others, Mike Mulroy, Gail, Manny Batra, who were also extremely supportive of me. But I would have to say Don Breidenbau really opened the pathway for me and, you know, sort of brought me in. Not only was I the first woman on a board, I've been on other boards that had a lot of luminaries on them when I was older. I was the youngest person on the board. And the board was full of absolute luminaries in the field. I mean, there was no way you could not be intimidated. I mean, what were you going to tell Alan Winnie to, to just let you have a comment on something he had just said? It was crazy. And then there was the obligatory cigar smoking and joke telling, and I think it is one of the best pieces of ASRA is that ability for people with a common interest to share not just their specialty, but then become friends and share all sorts of other things. And that, I think, is what's remarkable about this society and why it works.
Right.
ASRA, more than most societies I've seen, has kept a firm finger on the pulse of the future while hanging on to the past. And they remember their history. There's always someone speaking about what went on before. It's pretty unique, actually, in medicine at all. Right. And I think it's really unique to this society. And maybe that's the legacy of the Founding Fathers. Maybe. That they were such a strong piece that their spirit will always infuse that bedrock of this society and make us remember where we came from.